Hello friends, this video is about the story of motorcycles. The company's story began in the summer of 1900 at a velodrome in the American heartland. For the bicycle manufacturer George Handy, bicycle racing was not just a business, but a way of life. He himself had recently been a famous racer. Engineer Oscar Hedstrom tried to interest athletes in his self-built motorcycle for pacing races, a very popular type of competition at that time. In the end, Oscar got Handy interested. The industrialist liked the motorcycle so much that he suggested organizing joint production in the city of Springfield, Massachusetts. The partners decided to give their creation the most American name possible, Indian, meaning Native American. The first Indian motorcycle, which came out in 1901, featured a very advanced design for its time. First of all, Hedstrom abandoned the bicycle frame that was common at the time. The specially designed frame had a large diameter front tube that housed the dry batteries for the ignition system, and the engine itself served as the seat tube. It was a single-cylinder, four-stroke engine with a displacement of 260 cubic centimeters and an output of just 1.75 horsepower. The designer placed the fuel tank in a bulge on the rear fender. In addition, Oscar dared to use a chain drive from the engine to the rear wheel, while all other motorcycle manufacturers of that time preferred belt drives. In the first year, the partners sold only 3 motorcycles, but in the next year, they sold 143. This figure, by the way, put them among the largest motorcycle manufacturers in the world in 1904. Hedstrom upgraded the machine, increasing the engine displacement to 310 cubic centimeters and the maximum power to 2.25 horsepower. A year later, he switched to a spring-loaded front fork, but the main innovation of that season was the throttle handle, not on the right as we're used to, but on the left instead of the coins that were common at that time. In 1905, production volume exceeded 1,000 units for the first time. The company introduced its first motorcycle with a 2-cylinder V-shaped engine in 1907. As with the single-cylinder models, the rear cylinder of the engine served as the seat tube of the frame. With a displacement of 633 cc, it produced a maximum power of 3.5 horsepower. The company also produced a special racing version with an engine enlarged to a 1-liter displacement. In 1908, the motorcycles were equipped with magneto ignition. In addition, the engines began to be produced in 2 versions, with an automatic intake valve or with a mechanically driven system for both valves. The displacement of the single-cylinder model was increased to 442 cubic centimeters and the maximum power to 3.5 horsepower. The power of the twin with mechanically driven valves increased to 5.5 horsepower. The new closed tubular frame design appeared on motorcycles in 1909. It allowed for a lower center of gravity, reduced vibration, and simplified assembly. The new horizontally shaped fuel tank was positioned between the upper tubes of the frame. Interestingly, the cylinder of the single-cylinder engine retained its backward tilt. To the 633 cc twin, a similar machine was added with a 998 cc engine, producing 7 horsepower. For the most conservative motorcyclists, motorcycles with belt drive to the rear wheel began to be produced on order. The legendary front fork with a longitudinal quarter-elliptic spring, which became a hallmark of motorcycles until the late 40s, first debuted in 1910. An equally important innovation was the use of a clutch and a 2-speed gearbox, at first only by special order. By the 1911 season, Hedstrom had built a racing motorcycle with a V-twin 1-liter engine and 4-valve cylinder heads. This machine soon broke all American speed records. The company sent its team to the most prestigious race of that time, the British tourist trophy on the Isle of Man, with the 585cc version of the 4-valve engine. At that time, a 600cc 2-cylinder machine was also allowed in the senior class. The Americans completely crushed the British, taking all 3 podium places. Once again, Indian was ahead of the entire motorcycle world in 1913. It was in this year that the company's motorcycles came standard with a swing-arm rear suspension using longitudinal quarter-elliptic springs as the spring element. A rigid suspension could only be ordered by special request at that time. At that time, all models were also equipped with flat footrests, platforms, and luggage racks. That year, 90% of the motorcycles produced by the company were equipped with V-twins. In 1914, a bike was released featuring a 7-horsepower engine, a 2-speed gearbox, and an electric starter. Also in 1914, a bike with reduced power, the model, appeared, weighing 59 kilograms with an engine capacity of 225 cubic centimeters. The model lasted less than 3 years and was discontinued in 1916. In 1917, after the United States of America joined the fighting in World War I, the company profitably retooled and began producing motorcycles for military needs. From 1917 to 1919, a lightweight motorcycle was produced. Equipped with an inline 2-cylinder engine with horizontally arranged cylinders and a displacement of 250 cubic centimeters. In the early 1920s, another outstanding person joined the company, which remained the world's largest motorcycle manufacturer, racer Charles Franklin, who won many prestigious titles. Soon, Franklin took the position of vice president of the company, and it was thanks to him that Indian participated in motorcycle races. In 1920, a motorcycle model was released that was produced until 1949 and became the most famous in the history of the company. The model is also associated with the well-known story of Burt Munro's speed record. The motorcycle enthusiast from New Zealand, Burt Munro, set a world speed record on a motorcycle in 1967, 295.44 kilometers per hour, in the class of streamlined motorcycles with an engine capacity of up to 1,000 cubic centimeters. During the qualifying run, Burt reached a speed of 331.52 kilometers per hour, but this run ended with a crash and the record was not counted. At the same time this motorcycle was produced in 1920, the production model had a top speed of only 90 kilometers per hour, and for more than 40 years, Munro modified and improved it, dreaming that his motorcycle would become the fastest. Based on these events, the film The World's Fastest Indian was made, starring Anthony Hopkins in the lead role. In 1922, a model debuted that lasted until the very last day of the company's existence. The engine displacement was 999 cubic centimeters. The motorcycle reached a top speed of 150 kilometers per hour, or 110 with a sidecar. In 1923, the lineup was expanded with a model featuring an engine displacement of 1,212 cubic centimeters. In 1929, these heavy, fast motorcycles were equipped with a front brake for the first time. Also from 1925 to 1929, a model with a single-cylinder 350cc engine with side valves was produced. And since 1926, an overhead valve engine was also offered as an option. The next significant event in the company's history was the acquisition of the firm, which took place in 1927. This did not add much to the production capacity, but as a result of the acquisition, some talented engineers and designers joined Indian, in particular, Arthur Lemon. Using his experience in engine development, Arthur began working on a new power unit, which soon came out under the name Indian. From 1928 to 1942, the Indian 4 model was produced. With its help, the Indian company hoped to defeat its longtime rival, the Harley-Davidson company, in the competition. And for that, a flagship motorcycle was needed. The powerful 4-cylinder FO model was perfect for this role. After 1940 FO series, motorcycles were produced for another 2 years, mainly by order of law enforcement agencies. After the attack on Pearl Harbor in December 1941, all sales to civilians were suspended. Industry, including the motorcycle industry, began working for the war machine. After World War II, Indian did not resume production of the 4. As a result of inflation, the price of the motorcycle would have reached astronomical levels. However, even before the war, it cost $1,000. It was an expensive motorcycle, comparable in price to cars. Also in the 1930s, the company produced a 3-wheeled delivery vehicle called Dispatch Tow, based on the Sport Scout model. Throughout World War II, the company was engaged in developing military equipment for the Allied forces, which allowed it to earn a substantial profit for the needs of the Army. Starting from 1941, 1,056 Indian Model 841 motorcycles were produced, featuring a transverse V-twin engine with a displacement of 744 cubic centimeters. But the motorcycle met a sad fate. By the time the batch rolled off the assembly line, the African military campaign for which the motorcycle was intended had ended. However, while the management of Indian was making money from the war, they forgot about civilian motorcycle production. The main competitors from Harley-Davidson managed to raise their production to an extremely high level and actually pushed out from the market. In 1948, the company introduced 2 civilian bike models at once, one equipped with a 220cc engine and another fitted with a 440cc power unit. But these motorcycles became the last in the company's history. In 1953, it was declared bankrupt. In February 1953, the last civilian Chiv was produced for general sale, and on May 9, 1953, the final batch of 50 Chiv motorcycles with a 1,300cc engine was assembled for the New York police. And that's when the story of the living dead began. The Brockhouse Company didn't bother with resuming production or developing new models anymore, and just started churning them out mindlessly. Nameplates, Indian ones on those British motorcycles which they were importing. Under the Indian brand, they started selling British motorcycles in the United States, and by the late 1950s, also English motorcycles. In 1959 and 1960, Indian's distribution network switched to selling matchless motorcycles. The next chapter in the brand's history was written by Floyd Clymer, a successful publisher and until recently, a dealer of Indian motorcycles on the west coast of the United States. In the mid-1960s, he acquired the rights to use the Indian name. There were a huge number of plans for revival, but it all ended sadly. In partnership with the German designer Munch, a prototype of the new model was developed. The prototype was shown in the United States at the end of 1967. It was a modernized 745cc 2-cylinder V-type side valve engine from back then, implanted into Munch's chassis. It turned out to be pointless and unusually ugly. In 1969 and the early 70s, on the markets of the United States of America and the United Kingdom, about 200 motorcycles with a 499cc single-cylinder engine and a dozen with a 736cc twin-cylinder engine were sold under the brand. Meanwhile, Clymer started selling lightweight Italian-made motorcycles under the brand in the States. Unfortunately, in January of 1970, 74-year-old Floyd Clymer died, and the revival of the brand was once again left hanging in the air. The rights to the brand were bought from the widow by a lawyer from Los Angeles, Alan Newman, who continued importing motorcycles. Besides that, under the brand, he began selling lightweight motorcycles made in Taiwan with two-stroke engines ranging from 49 to 171 cubic centimeters. When Newman went bankrupt in 1975, the rights were transferred to American Moped Associates under the Indian Foe brand. As soon as they have a tongue, he turned around. From 1977 to 1981, she sold Taiwanese-made scooters with a 50cc four-stroke engine. In 1999, the Indian Motorcycle Company, headquartered in Gilroy, California, released its first batch of motorcycles with a 1,441 cc V-twin engine produced by the company. In 2000, the company introduced a sportier version of Model A, and a year later, a model that was something in between. In 2011, the company announced the acquisition of the company, after which the company's shares went up. In addition, they immediately developed a plan for the development of the new acquisition, and Silno is counting on it in the near future, having two brands in its portfolio, and plans to capture 60% of the North American market in the heavyweight motorcycle category, where the total annual revenues of all companies amount to $4 billion. At the moment, the company has prepared a new line of motorcycles for release, which is, in fact, a significant event in motorcycle history. Whether the renewed Indians will regain their former glory or not, only time will tell. That's all for now. See you next time.